Oh my God. Okay. We are now going to.
Whose is this? Is that his?
Just herding cats again.
Can I close his out then?
Come on, Sonny, herd those cats.
I know. I'm actually enjoying the exchanges. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, do take your seat.
She's lost control.
We are going to turn to the broadband deployment issue. Okay, you're doing well. Let's calm down the conversation. Get everything, and please do get all the coffee and the soft drinks and the cookies. There's lots here. In terms of broadband deployment, the infrastructure, there is actually, as you know, a relationship between infrastructure and adoption. All the data shows the better the infrastructure, the higher the adoption. And in areas that are considered more urban, there are still going to be pockets of lower speed. There's going to be community facilities that aren't connected or aren't digital hotspots. Many urban communities don't have their schools or their libraries that are hotspots. Okay. Jeff, will you sit down and stop talking to Susan? Dawn, stop talking to Darren. Brent, sit down. Okay. So what I want to have you keep in mind is whether or not you're rural or urban as a region. And actually in every region there are rural areas. There are remote, unserved areas, believe me. And every urban area has pockets where there's not the best connectivity. So there's this relationship between the infrastructure and adoption, between deployment and adoption. We're going to hear from Michael Morris about the mapping that the Public Utilities Commission now has the responsibility to do. And one of your responsibilities as a regional consortium is to keep verifying the data or reconciling the experience to what is mapped. And the mapping has gotten a lot more refined. The best mapping in the country is now done here in California with the California Public Utilities Commission. And all of this is trying to give you information so that you can figure out what's the most cost-effective way to get infrastructure to your highest priorities in your community. So Deborah asked me during the break, what do you do if you have a company that's not very responsive? I said, now you have a consortium. Invite them in, have an official meeting, and start explaining the problems and documenting the responses. So that's one of the values of having a consortium. If you've got a community that is pretty isolated and not likely to be the highest market target for a company, and we heard from Doug all of this that's going on, or actually we heard from Chester's brother, yes, Chris.
That's our problem too.
See if there is a way to joint venture, connect with a public purpose network, connect with Scenic. You heard Jim's commitment, and John Charles and Tom West earlier. Figure out if maybe there is a casino in the area that has a high-speed connection or some other resort. So a partnership with the private sector is what I'm really saying. There's lots of ways to look at how to get communities served by being a little bit more creative. So with that, let's turn to Mike Morris, and he's going to be followed by Darren Sanford, giving you the information about the infrastructure, the deployment side of this picture today. And Mike Morris has hung in there with us over the full 5 years that we've been in existence, and has, I think, really enjoyed the opportunity to get out and work with all the regional leaders, right? Mr. Morris.
Thank you very much. I have enjoyed it, and I know a lot of you. I've met a lot of you, and I'm looking forward to getting to know the rest of you and getting to know those I've met better in the next months ahead. Let me talk to you a little bit about what we're doing as with also grant money from the NTIA. This is mapping grant money. We're doing more than mapping, but let me bring you up to date about our mapping efforts. First of all, the maps we have finished the 4th round of collecting data. We do this every 6 months from the providers. And it takes some time after you get it to massage it, to verify it, and to get it mapped. So these maps have just actually been put up today. Let me show you where to find them. This is our website. Of course, you go to the communications division. Most of you, who has not visited the communications division website at this point? Okay, good. Well, I encourage you to do so. There's just a wealth of interesting things. But the maps you find in the service provider area, and there is a link that says state broadband availability maps. Okay, our first choice here are the interactive maps, both the state map and the national map. And here is a new layout that I think will be very useful. I am going to show you briefly the map, and this is with data as of June 30th of this year, of wireless and of wireline and fixed wireless. And I'm going to see if hopefully that'll come in quickly. One moment. There we go. This is what this round's availability map looks like. And if you look at it compared to previous periods, you'll see some differences. Well, this is wait a minute, wrong map. Okay. Well, let me go to this map. Thank you. I'll go to this map. This is a map that is derived from a rawer version that has the download speeds and the upload speeds on it. And what we have done is coded this 3 ways. We're showing, it doesn't show up very well on the screen here, but it's on the website, and this is what I've handed around to people. The darkest red is the areas that are served, and those are the California's definition of served is speeds greater than 3 down and 1 up. Those are the darkest color. The next kind of the middle color is underserved, which is considered broadband but slower than that. And the lightest, the pink color, are the areas that are completely unserved. The areas in white have no households. So we're not focusing on those for the moment. And then we've got some statewide numbers up at the top, by which we show, if I could read it, that would be better. It's too small on my screen to read them. But you see the statewide numbers in each category: served, unserved, and underserved. And that gives us some idea of the magnitude of the, pardon me, that gives us an idea of the magnitude of the problem and the job ahead of us. Now, there are certainly issues with the data. And I think it's been getting better and better and better. I'll tell you where the biggest issues lie. There's 3 areas. One is wireless service. Oh, there, that came up. One is wireless service, which is not being shown there, but I can get that one. And we get a lot of comments that the map shows service where we just don't have any service, or it's not that fast, or it doesn't work. And so we have some money from NTIA that actually we're using to create an app for mobile phones, smartphones, and that will allow people to not only do speed tests, but test other qualities having to do with the network connection. And in fact, we're going to build tools in that will also determine whether there is what's going on with regard to network management, and be able to tell if there's different network management techniques being applied depending on the kind of traffic. So if there's a video stream, is the provider doing something that they're not doing if it's not a video stream, or if it's their video stream, is it different than other people? So these are things that the FCC is very interested in, I think the community as a whole, to adhere to the open internet concept. So that's going to be an app that's going to be free, it's going to be downloadable. People will be able to use it and crowdsource and send that information back to a central database, which will then be available publicly, and we can use to refine this map. We're also going to actually do drive tests, and because we feel that that's more accurate. We're distributing about 1,400 points around the state, which we will visit in the spring, and then at 6 month intervals after that. So we'll pick up changes in the network. We're going to measure at the same place. We're at the moment going to do Sprint, T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T, and I think that will be a really exciting project that will make this much more accurate. Another area of kind of inaccuracy, I think, is with WISPs, fixed wireless. We've had a hard time really nailing down where they offer service, and that's for a variety of reasons. But some of them are fault, by the way, and fault. It's things we've learned. I won't go into the details, but we are going to work for the next round of data we're collecting, which is going to be the end of January, as of the end of December of 2011. So we hope to get the fixed wireless situation more accurate there, and that, frankly, is, as you know, is going to be the solution to a lot of rural problems with regard to availability. Caroline is shaking her head. So in any event, that's what's happening there. Now we have done an analysis. You have that. This is of the availability. It's broken down by these categories of households in these different 3 categories: served, unserved, and underserved. And you'll see it's by county and rolled up to the state level. The data is reasonably consistent with what the FCC is saying, what other the Public Policy Institute is saying, and NTIA, who released a study recently. So there is a lot of, we're all using different methods to do some of this. So the answers are coming out reasonably the same, but it's going to get better. Next. Another problem that is really skewing things is a problem with how AT&T reported their maximum available speeds. The NTIA and we are trying to get them to report the speed in each census block that they're reporting, so it's accurate. AT&T has chosen so far to report it only at the county level. So San Francisco County, City of County of San Francisco, which you may know, has not approved installation of UVerse, so there's very little UVerse in San Francisco. Nevertheless, they have it in a neighborhood or 2, greenfield areas, and under that approach, they report 25 megabit speed in all of San Francisco County. In our last round, we didn't accept that, and instead we did a number of techniques to, we think, squeeze those speeds down to a more realistic level. It's not accurate. It's the best we could do. I'm thinking maybe it'll under display the actual AT&T speeds, and they may be upset about that. But if they are, they can just report the speed correctly by census block, and I'll clear this all up. And I suspect that's what's going to happen. Now, and AT&T is big enough numerically that that difference in reporting really has skewed a lot of the results. These results, by the way, that you're looking at is after we've adjusted for our belief of what the speeds are in the most recent data. Okay, what's coming? The online map, I think, has been a useful tool, and the next version, which we hope to release by the end of the year, will be much more useful because it will have lots and lots and lots of layers that are selectable by the viewer. So that you'll be able to select, for example, that what we call a pink map that shows the served, unserved, or underserved. You will be able to zoom in to a particular area, whether it's a county, whether it's a census tract, and we'll also put a layer that's the new regional consortia boundaries. So you'll be able to select your own regional consortium area and display just that. And you'll also be able to do things like if there are grant applications, it should be fairly easy to overlay the areas where you want to do grants with this pink map and see what is eligible for funding. And as I think the rest of the PUC folks will explain, that there's a consideration now in a rulemaking about changing the definition in California of what's underserved. As we do that, that'll obviously, if the speed goes up, the number of underserved homes will go up. And so more areas will be eligible for grants. So this is a dynamic effort. So we're doing a lot of things, though, that go beyond this broadband inventory, task. I told you about the wireless app. We also have been asked by the NTIA to spend some effort individually helping out the grantees and the consortia to help them understand the situation locally and to help them be successful. And this might be things like, it's really creating very local maps that are customed. It'll help track progress of your particular projects. We'll have to look at tracking different things depending what the project is, but that will be happening. And what we'll do is in the next months, we're going to have myself or a member of my staff or people from Cal State Chico are helping us, and Kathy Emerson, and she's got people. And we want to go and meet with you, sit down, find out what information we can gather and present to you in what way to really help you figure out what you need to be doing. So that's one project. I'm thinking that this is how we're going to, I said I'm looking forward to getting to know you all, and this is how we're going to do it. We're also, we've got some money to focus on tribal lands and getting deployment and adoption up in tribal lands. So we're looking for some pilot projects to be able to do with that, and we may have, we're meeting tomorrow to try and hone in on where we want to do those projects. And finally, we're involved in the staffing of the California Broadband Council. That staffing effort, unfortunately, has been kind of slow, but there are letters, there are people about to be hired, and that'll really crank up more. But there are working groups being set up, and I may be reaching out to you in terms of helping out on that. Email me if you're interested. There are things like barriers at the local level, how to bring those barriers down. There's things like, particularly for wireless folks, what can we do to make more state structures or federal structures or other structures that might be suitable for antennas available to people more easily and more cheaply. Finally, I will say on a personal note, we are posting a lot of job requisitions. There's 3 postings now. There's going to be 3 or 4 more to come in the coming weeks. If any of you know anyone who might be interested in a job and don't want to go to Sacramento and be working with the California Technology Agency as an assistant secretary, look up the PUC. We're happy to entertain you. And that basically is what I wanted to tell you. I would like some help from you with regard to, I told you we're locating 14 points to measure. One of the things we're doing there is looking at the areas where we've gotten feedback, either through the interactive map and the surveys after that, ours or the federal ones, or through the dead zone app that the FCC has. We plot those, and we're trying to make sure that those areas where people have said there's problems, that we put extra measuring points there. And I'd like to also focus on areas that have been vocal about issues, Mendocino, El Dorado County, right, Humboldt, and so forth, and work with you to locate some testing points that will really help you folks out. So, yes, Carol.
Michael, first of all, I want to commend you for the improvement in these maps. They're significantly better. But we've got a significant problem of people that are trying to deploy this service in that the investors want to know where's the bright line between served and unserved. Okay? The example I'll give you is that in Placerville, we have, we're served by both Comcast and AT&T in different parts. On Cold Springs Road, which is right in the city, one side of the street has service from one of those vendors, and the other side doesn't. And there's no way to report that. The people on the unserved side can't even get to your maps to be able to complain they can't get service because they're getting max 33 kilobit connections. We need to seriously look at going from the bottom up to get this data instead of from the top down. 1,400 points is a pretty coarse model. But you and I've talked, and I would love to talk with you about how can we convince the NTIA, for example, to let us just do a bright line map for our county so we know and we can get investment to be able to solve this problem and demonstrate the difference between that bright line map and the actual maps that both the Fed and you're producing. Yeah. There's systemic errors, and they're different from individuals reporting it's not true for me.
Right. And I appreciate the viewpoint and the concern. To a certain extent, this program that the NTIA has funded was never really intended or envisioned to really get down to the granular house by house, block by block level, and it's not going to, I'm afraid.
But we won't get funding.
But it's by census block in areas where there are small census blocks. Where there's bigger census blocks, it's by street road segment. And there are problems on borders of census blocks because the street goes right down the border of the block, and when you say this is served, you don't know if it's not served on that side of the street and served on that side of the street. But there are 760,000 census blocks in California, and it really is extraordinarily unlikely that we're going to be able to go more granularly, kind of house by house and block by block. Yes, but I can tell you that we're kind of taxing the power of the computers we have now. I guess we could engage supercomputers, but to make a map like this can take it needs to be left to run for hours and hours and hours overnight. It's a lot of data.
So, Michael, in terms of the applications, the apps you were talking about, to be able to verify service or not,
Right.
and your own drive test, would you
Yes.
not be able to work with a
yeah,
consortium
yes,
on
but
this?
absolutely, but that's mobile service only.
Oh,
And
okay.
Carol Ann is
Right.
is really saying even on the fixed service there are
Got it.
issues.
Okay.
But I will say, and I appreciate that it's hard to respond in a survey on the interactively when you don't have access, but maybe they can go to their neighbors across the street and log in there, or at community centers or some such thing, because the feedback.
Fortunately, 82% of our workforce is exported out of the county to jobs, so
They can do it from the office. Now that Black Monday's over, they can do it. They can do that at the office.
So Mendocino County does have another comment on mapping.
Yeah.
My understanding, Mr. Morris, is that the database that you're using is information that is delivered to you from the providers, AT&T and all the Comcast and
Yes.
and the cellular companies. I would propose that, at least in Mendocino County, the reason that data is so worthless is that they're not coming to the granular level. So Mendocino County, the Broadband Alliance of Mendocino County, has undertaken our own survey and mapping. And we're actively pushing it right now. We're on the radio, we're in the newspapers. We're making a presentation to the Board of Supervisors on the 6th of December. And we're going to collect the data from the bottom up. And I'm asking you to find a way for that information to be plugged into your mapping database. Because if we continue to rely on the big carriers, it's in their best interest to obfuscate. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
We will. I think that the problem you're saying is with areas being eligible for grants. And if they're shown as serving or not, they can't get grants and otherwise. So in the grant process, yeah, and that's not my group, but the grant group is here, so sitting gets well, they can address it when they talk. But the maps are kind of a prima facie, rebuttable, if you will, presumption about where there's service. In the grant process, you can bring in other information and say that's not actually, this area is actually unserved, and here's what we have to show you that it is. And they're nodding yes, they'll take that into consideration.
It's both for grants and for private investment.
Bingo.
And that's, and I think, I'm, at least that's what I'm hearing you say, and now they're shaking their heads. So this is an area where there's going to be a lot more interaction. The PUC staff that does this mapping, Michael and with CSU Chico, I think are going to welcome, we'll make sure they do, your intelligence and methodology, because the whole thing here is about accuracy. Glenn Humison and I were talking about what does the U.S. Department of Agriculture take, and part of the larger conversation that we in California want to have with the Federal Communications Commission and all federal agencies is, in California we have a strategic plan. We actually have processes that are more refined than theirs. We want them to start working with us and through us. Okay. One more comment, Carol Ann, and that's it. Then, I mean, only right now because I got to move on. Thank you.
I want to make a strong distinction between accuracy and precision. Okay? Accuracy is to say, today is Thursday. I can say very precisely, today is Sunday at 2:03 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's not very accurate, but it's precise. We need both accuracy and precision.
Wow. This has become a seminar far beyond what I ever envisioned. We're so glad to have organized.
This is the map kind of that we're using to develop the points that we're going to measure. Dots are points. And you see that these little purple things up here around, I think that's Mendocino. These purple things here are results of dead zone reports going to the FCC. And you can see there's a big cluster of them there, and we didn't have, so one of the things we're going to do, and I want to sit down with the Mendocino folks and say, gee, we should test there, there, and there. I mean, we can't test every block, but that's the kind of feedback that we're applying.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Mike. I was going to say, we're so glad we could organize this job fair as well. Remember, Carlos needs somebody, Mike needs somebody, so okay. We're now going to go to our Vice President for Technology, Darren Sanford, to give you, and he is going to really compress a lot of information that is in your packet, but about the projects that have been funded and what we know about them. The other thing that is worth looking at in your area are the projects that were proposed and not funded, proposed to the CETF, proposed to ARA, because it's some indication of where there was demand or market perception of demand, and it's something to assess as you're trying to advise the PUC. Okay.
Hi, everyone. The information that's being presented here, the entire PowerPoint is in your handouts. So I'll quickly refer to that, then you can take it, because there's a tremendous amount of data later on. There's a lot of tables and some numbers that we'll talk high level about. So here's the list of what I'm going to be doing. Quickly say that California was the lead on this, and if you look at what we've done over the past several years, a lot of that now is the policy and framework for what the federal government is doing. They're mimicking a lot of what we've done over the past. Next one is the results of the broadband activity that we've been working on for many, many years now. The next one is the cost effectiveness of the projects that were actually successfully undertaken and awarded funds. And then the status of these projects, how are they with regard to completion, and then finally what we're going to do going forward. So a little bit of history, if you time warp back to 2005, and it was considerably a long time ago if you consider what's been going on. One of the conditions of the M&A for the telecommunications companies here in California were that $100 million would be put into building out telecommunications in California. That was done in 2005. Of that, $60 million came to CETF and others went elsewhere. 2006, the CBTF was formed, California Broadband Task Force, and that was to determine how we can have telecommunications stay on the forefront for California going forward. And that was a group of 21 senior members of private and public organizations. 2007, the CSF fund was created by the CPUC. That's $100 million. That has now been changed, and there's far more money in there as well. And then in 2008, CETF started working with the Rural Regional Consortia for the deployment projects and the adoption. And again, in 2008, the first maps came out. So if you look at comparing what we've been doing in California since 2005, this is relatively new elsewhere in the country. And in fact, when you look at it, 2009 is when the federal government got involved for broadband. Meanwhile, California had been doing that for a while. 2011, only this year, and a lot of this was only in the last 2 quarters, the National Broadband Plan was released. The first national broadband maps were released. The Connect to Compete program was only published 2 months ago, and that was the program that Rochelle spoke about. And then the Universal Services Fund and intercarrier compensation will now be directed toward broadband versus traditional voice. So a lot of this mimics the programs and activities taking place in California since 2005. So we are well ahead of that. And the benefit of that is that we are able to catch up and start leveraging the federal activities when they came into place. And it made a huge impact to California, and I'll share the results. So the first project, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated, CSF is the program that Rochelle was speaking about that the CPUC rolled out, and in total by itself, it was to service roughly 17,500 households. Then the federal government came in with their program, and the challenge with CSF is whether it was a 40% match. 60% of the funds had to come from the carriers, and in rural areas, that could be difficult to achieve. When the federal government came in and they did the ARA projects, BTOP and BIP, it came in and it can actually start compensating for that 60%, up to the point where carriers may only have to come up with 1 to 10% of the funds for the project. And you'll see the significant impact to that. CASF plus BTOP was 255,000 households, compared to 17,000 just for CASF. BTOP is the program that's run by the NTIA within the Department of Commerce. The other program is run by USDA BIP, in the Rust department, and that is the BIP program. And you'll see the two of those came up to roughly about 4,000 households. It could have been far more than that, but the definition of rural doesn't really match California's demographics. Had the definition of rural been different, it could have had a larger impact to California, but that wasn't the case. So you'll see that the impact was very negligible for California, household-wise. And then there's also another program, USDA Rust Community Connect, which so far has mostly been focused on tribal lands, and that's roughly 670 households. So the big change was ARA came in to assist CETF to get further dollars in as a match, which meant that carriers had to come up with less matching dollars, which means the projects became much bigger, and to the point where 3 of the projects, which account for 255,000 households, are all middle mile with a small last mile component. These are fiber projects, Digital 395, which is the California Broadband Cooperative, the Pluma Sierra project, and the Central Valley Independent Network, CVIN project. Massive, massive impacts. And that was a thanks to the ARA dollars helping out CASF. And this is the impact total. So if you look at it, the projects take 2 to 3 years to complete. Since we started so long ago, the households actually started coming into play last calendar year and this calendar year. So of these projects, you'll see that by the end of 2004, we'll have roughly 275,000 households connected because of these projects. And you'll see a good chunk of it because of the federal activity, specifically BTOP, which complemented CASF. Now, the challenge with California is that 275,000 households is wonderful. However, if you look at a percentage of the population and households of California, roughly 5% are still underserved or unserved. And when there's 17,500,000 households in California, 5% is a massive number. We still have a long way to go. And California has some big challenges. Not only the distribution of the population, but the terrain. That causes massive changes in the cost per household for each project. And you're going to see this in the next page. On the low end of the cost, we have Mediacom Frontier CVIN projects, where the cost per household is $100, $113, $200. You'll see a lot of projects going up to the $750 range here, and the amount of households that they're servicing is in there as well. Then you start moving up. Still very reasonable pricing, achieving a good amount of households, and then you start getting into difficult terrain, where the price per household goes up dramatically. And this is a technology issue, it's a terrain issue, it's a distribution of population issue. California has it all. We have flatlands, we have terrain with winter, we have ecosystems that can't be touched, we have riverbeds and watershed systems. Very difficult. So you see it goes from $100 or $78 up to $206,000 per household. The full gamut is there. And there's certainly a lot of opportunities for us to leverage each other's knowledge and abilities and the design and the solutions for each of these projects to try to tailor fit solutions to different communities. Now this is the status of the projects that were publicly funded, and there's many different ways to get publicly funded. One is the state CASF dollars, some is the BTOP money, some is the RTI program, which is run by CPUC as well, and then there's also, on the next page you'll see the 2 federal programs. These are the projects that started many years ago. Early on, they're complete now, 100% done. And as you see, all of them are state funded other than one Community Connect project, which was a USDA Rust program. The next one is projects that are well underway. You'll see most of them are actually over 10% done, right up to 92% done. And one of them actually will be done this week, but I'm not going to disclose unless Mary Lou wants me to. Where is she? Is she still here? Oh, she's gone? Okay. So unofficially, there's some good news coming from IP Networks shortly. And that's another fiber project. And then now there's new projects, and these ones just recently were approved by the CPUC. Frontier Communications has 3 of them, so they're at 0% completion. The USDA Rust BIP recipients, most of them have just finally received their authorization letters, as well as some of their FONSIs to move forward. So at this point, now they're started. So that's why you see some of these at a very low percentage for BIP awards. They're now all actively moving forward. There are no projects now that are paused in California. So we're looking forward for these to be completed. And you'll see one of them is a significant one. CVIN is a massive, massive project, huge impact with the amount of households. So now going forward, what are we going to do? The Rural Regional Consortia, now participating with the CPUC, is an active and vital way to get the community involved with what's going on. But on top of that, you have to work with the service providers, and on top of that, they have to get funding. So some of the things that CETF has been doing, in addition to the rural consortia, was doing engineering, planning, operations, architecture, finance, human resources, budgeting, strategy, you name it, everything that an ISP needs to have done, including regulatory assistance, we've been helping them. This is something else that is a gap that needs to be addressed. ISPs are very good at bringing in broadband. They're not necessarily very good dealing with companies such as regulatory entities or working with grant programs. That is something that's relatively foreign to how they operate. They need a lot of assistance to bring those together. In addition to that, they could use assistance on any of these functions, engineering, planning, operations, et cetera. They may be used to their community, and expanding out maybe beyond their brain share. They may need assistance with that. So that has to be addressed in your activity that you're doing on a day-to-day basis in the consortia. Work with the ISPs and understand what else do they need, not necessarily just geared toward financing. What else do they need to be successful in their projects? And it runs the full gamut. You can think of any department within a very large corporation, they may need that kind of assistance for each of those departments. That's something to address. So as I mentioned, that's 275,000 households. 5% of 17,500,000 isn't 275,000. There's still probably another 500,000 to 800,000 households that need to be connected. Going forward, there's still lots of opportunity though. There's incremental network augments. As service providers realize there's a gap, and the maps that Michael Moore showed is a good way to show that. There's a gap, they can go in and fill them with incremental growth, knowing that there's a customer base there. The other one is working with public funds. Right now, there's not that many of them. There's CSF version 2.0, which I'm calling until it has another name. Potentially, it's going to be 80 to 90% match. So that would be equivalent or better than what you could get with CSF and ARA. And that would help make a lot of business proposals make sense from an ROI perspective. The last one is work with entrepreneurs to try to get loans, revolving loans, or private capital to go into a network and build a network where there's a customer base that's seeking the services. And there's potential ROI for that if the customer base is large enough. And that's where the maps come in handy as well. So finally, thank you very much for your time. You have all the information in the packets. Please call me if there's anything I can do to help, and CSF as well as CETF are here to help.
Thank you, Darren. So I think between Michael Morris and Darren Sanford that they have offered to come meet with you to figure out the methodology that will get you to accuracy, not just precision, to think through with your maps. Literally, we envision, sit down with the map of your region and look at, on a blown-up basis, what is served and is not. Denise looked at the chart and said there's no way Lake has 99% service. However, as I've discovered in Lake County, the county of Lake actually controls the top of Connecti Mountain, and so there's a whole lot of opportunity that we discovered in one afternoon, and it was a Friday afternoon, and there were 30-plus people in the boardroom of Lake County. People will come, and you can figure out sort of on the tabletop where are some opportunities. And then think in terms of cost effectiveness of getting deployed your infrastructure to unserved areas. We will work with you, and I think you have, with Darren and Michael, a real resource to talk this through, okay? We've actually, I'm in control of nothing. The program people have flipped their own order and have told me they're doing it differently than we had planned, and that's okay. So I'm about to do that introduction, but I have a veteran director of CETF who has joined us, so newly joining us, but a founder of the Great Valley Center, now has served in state government, been a mayor of Modesto, and now works for California Strategies, Carol Whiteside.
Thanks, Sunny. I noticed, because I've known Sunny as long as we've both been in public service, that she refrained from using the O word. That would be old. It's really good to see everybody here today working on rural telecommunications as a strategy for community development, not just economic development, but community development, has been something very much on my plate for a very long time since I actually worked with Pete Wilson. I'll tell you, my first internet story, I got to state government in 1991. The internet was just hot new stuff then. Anybody remember that, that first web browser, which was called, anybody remember the first one? Mosaic. Oh no, way before that. Sparkle. What was it? Sparkle. No, come on now, I've forgotten it. Mosaic, yes, of course. So, so I'm sitting in the Governor's Office of Planning and Research on Mosaic, and in comes Hal Conklin, who was then the mayor of Santa Barbara. And I said, Hal, look at this, you're not going to believe it. And I took the Mosaic browser and we went to the Prado Museum in Seville, and then I went and I started playing classical guitar music from the Boston Symphony. And I said, isn't this amazing? And he said, yeah, it's interesting, but I don't know what use it is, and turned and walked out of the office. Well, things have changed a lot since then, that's for sure. In 1997, we issued a report that talked about the importance of bringing broadband to rural communities as a way of stimulating economic development and reducing the disparity between rural and urban. The unfortunate reality is that all these wonderful good ideas, when taken to scale, take a very long time. And now we're 10 years later, really, maybe 10 years later, let's say roughly, and we're really beginning to see some progress. The challenge for us has been to figure out how we can be top-down and bottoms-up at the same time. And so while we understand the value and the importance of local civic leadership, it's also critically important that we have someone at a regional or state or national level, maybe all three, that can combine vision and can also provide leadership and facilitate aggregation, which we would call coordination or collaboration, bringing everybody all together. So now we're actually beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I wish that we could, Sunny, personally, and we all could take full credit for all the improvements in implementation and outreach in the last 10 years. The reality is many people have been working on it, many of you in your own communities, in your own counties, in your own regions, but we are beginning to make significant progress. And of course, 100% is our aspirational goal. Whether we ever get there or not remains to be seen, but I know we will continue to make rapid progress. And so for all of the people that I've worked with, and there are many of you here that we've worked with on projects over the last several years, I wish you Godspeed and great success.
Excellent. Thank you, Carol. It was actually in Carol's office at the Great Valley Center that I first saw Google Earth. You first showed it to me. And it was Carol who insisted that we put yet one more work group together for the San Joaquin Valley Partnership on advanced communication services. You kept pushing us all along. Okay, so now the flipped schedule that people have come up with is that let's go to the presentation from our head of the U.S. Department of Agriculture in California. Sort of taking what you've heard about the infrastructure and looking at what USDA is doing. Within the USDA is the Rural Utility Service, so there is funding for rural. We know in California that although we're the #1 ag state, that it's really hard to have a definition nationally of rural that works for a state such as California. So that's one of those issues that we have actually tackled. Keep in mind that the Ag Bill reauthorization is going to be coming up in the near future, and that's actually one of those opportunities to have some impact. Through the efforts that all of you had with ARA, we took a delegation and met with our congressional representatives, with NTIA, with USDA. USDA actually did a modification of the definition for the second round of ARA. So Secretary Vilsack has been responsive to the California delegation. In California, we have an even greater resource, and that is the head of USDA, because she's a Californian from the Santa Rosa. She's worked all over the country, and really is committed to working, and I know this personally watching her, in communities, in regions, and you know, as an example, one of the things we kick around is sort of fun idea with Glenda and her associate Robert C. is think about if we could connect all of the county fairs, the fair sites, with high-speed broadband as a sort of Homeland Security emergency response place, and that's also used 99% of the time for digital literacy. I mean, that's one of those kinds of network hotspot combinations we could think of in California. And what we've asked Glenda to help us do, because if you ever go to the notice of funding availability from USDA or Rural Utility Service, they're usually small grants, and we are a big place. And so we'd love to enter into a conversation with USDA about a statewide partnership over broadband deployment into rural California. So that's sort of what's up on the screen. I'm pretty confident that with Glenda's commitment, she's going to give us these insights. We're delighted she's here. Ladies and gentlemen, the head of USDA in California, Glenda Humiston. Glenda.
Okay. I'd hate to take your mic away from you, Sonny. And actually, you forgot to mention that when we were discussing those county fairgrounds, all that wonderful telecommunications, the other big demand for them was a slaughter facility on each of them. So, yeah. But again, that's getting towards a little bit of what I want to discuss with you today. As Sonny said, we've got a lot of opportunity for partnerships between USDA and California on when we look at broadband, telecommunications, et cetera. But I want to focus on the fact initially that we've got a lot of programs at USDA Rural Development other than the telecommunications. And that's crucial as this moves forward. For example, when you heard the Secretary speak a little bit earlier today, one of the examples he gave was the electronic debit card used for the food stamp program. One of our programs helps fund the equipment in those farmers markets that allows people to use the cards. Things like our multifamily housing, which we have literally tens of thousands of units around this state, often have resident services, and increasingly in recent years, we're putting in distance learning facilities into those. So on and on and on, community facilities, the business and industry programs, all of them can be used to move broadband forward and the use of communication technologies. Also, we've got people out in our field offices that are there to help you access these programs. One of the chief complaints I know I have, and several of you that have talked with me have, is that our rural utility service is managed out of Washington, D.C. It quite literally does not go through our state office. I often don't know what they're doing until one of you call me up to complain about the fact they treated you wrong. And I do appreciate getting those calls because it gives me an excuse to go and raise hell, which I actually love doing. Several months ago, I appointed Tammy Lejeune in our Oroville office to serve as a statewide broadband coordinator. She's been on a steep learning curve, and I think she's pretty much got the programs under her belt at this point. She is now got a chunk of her time focused on making sure we're keeping better track here in California of what the national office is doing, and that's going to help a whole bunch. Many of you know that I made a round of the state earlier this year. I hit every single county. It was a second round, actually. We got a lot of good information out of those, including the challenges that we all know. I'm not going to go over this because it's not rocket science, despite the fact people keep asking the same questions over and over, getting the same answers. What was new, though, was some clear identification of opportunities. And when you look at those opportunities, every single one of them needs advanced, working, effective, accurate telecommunications and access to it. In particular, one of the big efforts we've got going on right now here in California, not just my agency, but many, many, many partners, is jobs creation, economic development, getting our state onto a healthier footing. And one of the best bets we've got out there right now, statewide, is our agricultural value chains. This is a report that came out of the Chancellor's Office of the Community Colleges statewide in late June, looking at what were the opportunities. And frankly, the numbers are staggering. I'm not talking about farming. I'm talking about after a crop is harvested and leaving that farm, between that farm and that plate that you enjoyed at lunch today, all that value chain work. If we were to, as a state, aggressively pursue that strategy, you're talking about 181,000 jobs in the next 5 years, averaging almost $24 an hour. These are head of household jobs. These are distribution and processing and management and transportation and all the stuff that goes along with that. This is a strategy we've got to pursue, and it's not just food. The same type of strategy is very, very true for biofuels and alternative renewable energies. California has an amazing, truly amazing potential for renewables of all sorts, and in particular biofuels. One of the agreements we as an agency have right now, we're working very closely with the Navy. The Navy has a goal of utilizing 50% biofuels for its entire fleet by 2020. And that too is just around the corner. So what's it going to take? It's going to take moving beyond just policies. You know, we're here in San Francisco right now where Mayor Gavin Newsom about 5 years ago did some extraordinary work on pulling together a regional consortium to look at accessing local food. They put together a report, they got a lot of people on board with it, it's great policy. Things are kind of slowly moving forward. We haven't got near the traction on that policy that we want. The trick is we've got to move from the policy reports to this. We've got to start looking at the value chain. We've got to start literally, I can tell you from painful experience of the past year, we've got to literally start going out there and building these chain by chain by chain. It means literally going out and getting the people at each stage of that, sitting in a room together and talking about, oh, who are you supplying to? Who could you supply to? Where are you purchasing from now? What's missing? Is there a lack of transportation? We know for a fact there's a huge lack of cold storage. And across all of these chains, the big thing missing, e-commerce infrastructure. The big thing missing. How can the producers know what the consumers need and how to get it there without e-commerce? This is huge. As we move into this kind of system, we're going to be actually looking at radically changing our distribution models. And it's very timely to do this. I don't know about the rest of you, but that little thing called Occupy Wall Street this last few months, what have they been pointing out to us? That you know, the folks on Wall Street could care less about us. You know, they're taking our money, they're giving themselves very nice salaries, and they are not investing it in California. Actually, I shouldn't say that. California, Silicon Valley, and a few other places, maybe the film industry, a few other places, gets a little bit of that investment. The vast majority of our capital is going to China and India right now. So what are we going to do about it? Start looking at these value chains that I mentioned and start looking at them in a scientific manner, working with all the partners. This is just one example of a supply chain using Maslow's theory, but you can see every single piece in there requires information and communication technologies. There's absolutely no step in that chain that does not. That's why it is so crucial for us to get this chain in place. And yeah, there's a lot of wonderful things that, you know, are related to communications, technologies, information, broadband, et cetera. But for this strategy, we've got to start putting some focus on those initially that are really focusing on jobs and our economy. I'm not saying we don't do public safety and telemedicine. We've got very specific programs that target those at USDA, as does the state. But I can tell you, I said earlier, my personal commitment to this effort, as long as I have the ability to target our dollars in California, we're going to be targeting them so that as we get that infrastructure out there and that connectivity, that we're focused on improving these items first. Nothing against entertainment, but you know something? Time to focus on jobs. And especially in our rural. I'm not going to belabor the fact that rural is lagging urban by literally any measure you use. Connectivity by zip code, and the maps. Let's spend a little time on maps. You folks ought to be thrilled with the guy that was just up here a little while ago telling you about how California is doing mapping by census tract. You know, granted, I understand your concerns, but you ought to be thrilled California is at least doing census tract. Most of USDA still uses county as the jurisdiction for calculations of allocation of resources, as well as data that they use in almost every calculation. And California gets screwed every time they use county as a jurisdiction, because we got such huge counties. San Bernardino County is larger than 9 U.S. states.
Yeah, we know.
Did people realize that?
Yeah, we do.
California, and I don't have an office in San Bernardino
And
County.
why not?
Because I only have 18 offices in the whole state. California has 30 counties larger than a U.S. state. And by the way, you know, my staff, my offices scattered around the state are designed to best serve and deliver programs as we can. But keep in mind things like Arkansas, Georgia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, all have more staff and more offices than we do here in California. Well, because they have a couple hundred counties in their state. They're little tiny things. This is a big issue that we've got to look at. And it's not just that kind of thing, too. It's the issue with accuracy that was brought up earlier. This is a nationwide problem. It's actually not even just a California problem. It's a Western states problem, where we've got these larger counties. I'm pleased to say that my colleagues in the Western states have jointly put together briefing papers to the Western Governors Association, the Council of State Legislatures West, and other organizations like that, WASDA, the Western State Departments of Ag, briefing them on this issue and trying to use every angle we can to get USDA and Congress to understand that a county is not a county is not a county. There's a big difference between one the size of San Francisco and one the size of San Bernardino County. And especially when the one the size of San Francisco could be a whole state on the East Coast. So this is a huge issue. We're trying to work on the maps. I don't have a solution right now other than I have been given a commitment, at least verbally, by the Deputy Undersecretary for our mission area that if we can get a map from California, somehow certified by the state government that people will be happy with, we can use that instead of the USDA maps. It will not be the perfect solution, but frankly, it's a heck of a lot better than what you got now. Why is this important? And I think this is the kind of marketing message all of you need to be taking back to your hometowns. What's in it for me? That's one of the first things the folks that have the hospitals are going to say. Why should they fund broadband when they can't keep the hospital doors open? Why should they fund broadband when the schools are, you know, shutting down classrooms? Almost every study I've seen has shown that access to telecommunications assists all of those venues. I pulled this one up because it was one I found a few days ago that just was shocking. This was a study that our USDA Economic Research Service just did earlier this year. Hospitals that don't have telemedicine, it's costing them $370,000 a year. That's a lot of money for a small rural hospital. Now, granted, that's an average, but still. That's money that could be doing other equipment in that hospital, maybe an extra police person, maybe a couple more teachers at the school, getting the potholes in the road paved. I mean, that's a lot of money simply because those hospitals don't have access to telemedicine. And California doesn't do so well competing for telemedicine because, again, of the county situation and just other issues. This is the programs we have in rural utilities. It's a fair number of good programs, but again, I want to emphasize that as we move forward, we need to not just be talking about these specific programs. We need to be looking at how my business programs, our community facilities, housing, all of our programs. This past fiscal year, rural development invested almost $1 billion in this state. And frankly, I have to say, I think we could have perhaps had some of that investment better coordinated with y'all. That's a goal I have for this upcoming year. The good news is those programs do have at least some funding this year. For a while, we were looking at some significant cuts. But I have to say, the senator that threw a proposal on the Senate floor a month ago to completely cut our agency almost in half, cut 40% of our budget, created such an uproar. In fact, it's probably one of the most lopsided votes in the U.S. Senate in ages a few weeks ago. 83 to 15. They killed his proposal. Over 1,200 community organizations, folks just like you out there around the nation, stood up and said, hey, this rural development stuff, this infrastructure is crucial to our rural areas. And it made a huge difference when budget came out. Actually, I have to say, my agency didn't take near the cuts as some others. This is still pretty gross. As you know, they just did our budget a couple weeks ago, and the staff are still combing through it for all the little messages. I can tell you one message, though, that is definitely strongly through the whole thing. We are being told that as we do implement and allocate funds, to put the biggest focus possible on unserved households. And that's a new message this year. That was not in last year's budget. Now, how that unfolds, I can't say, but we're going to keep an eye on it. In closing, let me spend the next several slides mentioning to you the regional effort we are currently funding with business industry type funds. We've got regional efforts around the state right now who are focused on trying to do regional industry clusters. Food systems, biomass, value-added livestock, renewables. These are regions that we're working with where those folks in those counties had already started putting together a regional consortium. What we're doing is we're trying to bring into them as many resources as we can. For my part, I've given each of them a couple grants this past few years. One for a coordinator, because as you all know, as a regional consortium, if you don't have a body helping you, that's a huge problem. Now, I'm already in talk with a couple of your regions about perhaps providing that exact same grant this upcoming year. In particular, I've already been talking to the 395 broadband who are ripe for that. The other thing we've got going on that's very exciting here, Fresno, the city of Fresno was designated by the White House a couple months ago as one of its 6 communities for very special attention. It's an initiative called Strong City, Strong Communities. Fresno is the only city west of the Mississippi to be designated. It's also the only city designated that actually has a strong agricultural economy surrounding it. Because of that, they've asked USDA to take a leadership on that, and I have to say we've been thrilled to step up to the plate, partially because anytime implementing our programs runs into a problem with Department of Transportation, perfect example, short-haul rail, ag goods movement strategy, Department of Commerce, EPA, labor, whatever, HUD. We run into a lot of problems with HUD when we're trying to work on these. If I can tie the problem to Fresno, I get to go to the White House and say, hey, make them play nicer with us. Is anybody here from Colusa? Colusa County, they can tell you we're already using that to help push a short-haul rail solution up there because we were able to tie it into the short-haul rail issue around Fresno and Tulare County. So that's something that we're taking advantage of. In this case, we're actually linking up the region around Fresno directly into Los Angeles, where the mayor has a very, very, very strong LA Food Policy Council. That is to the point they're actually already looking at land for distribution hubs. We're looking on a statewide agricultural goods movement strategy with the notion of this transportation actually being fueled by biofuels produced in California too. And getting synergy and leveraging resources of all these efforts by coordinating them. And that's exactly the kind of thing that as we're doing this, I want to be working with your consortium on too. Because what you're working on and what these folks doing economic development are working on, you ought to be at the same table, frequently. We've got a lot of partners working on that regional consortium. I can give you more detail on this later. Basically, what these folks have all pledged is that when those regional industry clusters identify a roadblock or a resource they need, even if it's just an answer to a question, we do our best to try to provide it to them. Sometimes faster than others, but we do our best. We're looking at things like co-ops. In fact, I had the most amazing epiphany about 2 weeks ago. I was here in San Francisco getting a briefing from a woman about employee stock ownership programs. And in the course of that discussion, she and I all of a sudden had a light bulb go on, because our biggest challenge is building those value chains and the financing related to it. How about if a business person putting in that slaughterhouse and another business person with the cold storage and another one with the cut and wrap and whoever's the trucking or transportation and whoever does the e-commerce and whoever's maybe Whole Foods or a restaurant or farmer's market or whatever. How about if all those people formed one of these new, whatever the new B corporations are, or maybe even formed a co-op and shared the e-commerce along the whole line? Not a huge expense for any of them individually if they're sharing it. That's the kind of thing we're looking at. I don't know how many of you realize that Ace Hardware is a cooperative. That's how they've been surviving Home Depot. They share as a cooperative. They're each individually single-owned businesses, sole proprietors, but they formed a cooperative for their advertising, for their bulk purchasing, marketing, insurance. We're looking at stuff like that all over the state. In fact, we had some conversations several months ago with downtown Quincy looking at forming a cooperative to simply hire a geek for themselves to take advantage of the new high-speed broadband they just got to Feather River College, so the downtown can use it. A lot of opportunities for that. We've got California is one of 8 states in the nation right now that has a partnership with our Agricultural Research Service to quickly commercialize new technologies. Much of this new technology is things that facilitate biofuels, renewable energy, food, transportation, a host of stuff that is perfect for our strategy. We're working closely with CalEd and ARS on that. And then last but not least, of course, is capital. The value chains I'm talking about, getting those 181,000 jobs that I would like to see in the next 5 years, is going to take billions and billions and billions of dollars to finance. Everything from little tiny microfinance for somebody that's trying to use a commercial kitchen for their own little business, through individual development accounts, bank-on type stuff, existing banks doing a better job, impact investing, starting to focus on rural in these value chains. We're actually in conversations with venture capitalists. In fact, we've coordinated this California Financial Opportunities Roundtable. I'm in partnership with the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco to look at all these things and find out how we can improve access to capital all along the gamut. One of the things we're looking at there, in fact, I'm thrilled Chester's in the room because I love to give him credit for a great idea. We're going to be looking at creating a regional entity, and I say entity because I don't know yet if it's going to be some sort of institution like a credit union or some sort of mutual fund instrument. We don't know what it's going to be, but we're doing a lot of deep exploration of a regional entity that can manage and hold tax advantage funds, your IRA, your 401k. California citizens currently have trillions and trillions of dollars in IRAs and 401ks that have been sucked out of this state for people to play with elsewhere. What we want to do is start bringing some of that back. In fact, what we're trying to do in that regional entity is look at a 5% cap, because you saw probably in the crowdfunding legislation this last month or two how touchy it is to try to cut into some of Wall Street's share of the money. We're looking at we're looking at creating a regional entity where you and I could simply pick up a phone and say, hey, put 5% of my IRA in that regional fund. And have that regional fund be large enough so that it can remain liquid. I mean, I don't want to have to go drive up to Main Street, Quincy, and tell Joe's Bait Shop that I need my money now. It's got to be big so it can be liquid so you can manage the risk. But it's got to be easy. I mean, we can all right now do a self-directed IRA, but who's got the time or the knowledge? We've got to be able to hire professionals who can manage this for us, make it easy. And ideally, if we set this up right, set up the first region, one of the key things that's going to be funding is telecommunications infrastructure, because as we've seen, that's what's crucial. So that's one of the things we're working on. Our first meeting is in a few weeks. We've already got a lot of people doing a lot of research on this. As I said, we're taking a very scientific approach. In fact, in many ways, we're looking at this access to capital question as if it was implementing an entire huge complex infrastructure, which it is. And the good news for those of you in the north, I'm pretty positive our first region ought to be upstate, the 11 or so counties of the independent state of Jefferson. And I do that for a really simple reason, and I think you folks will agree with me. If I put 5% of my IRA in that fund, and if the right 30 or 40 other people from your region do, half your citizens will, I'd almost bet. Whereas if we tried to do something like that here in San Francisco, we'd mostly probably get a lot of yawns. You know, these city folks, they get too jaded. But as we design this, I want to make sure that when we set the first one up, and it's got to be perfect, the people managing it have to be of impeccable character, no shenanigans. But when we do we're going to have to get some legislative language on this. We need to do it so that we can put 5% in that region. And then we create one for, say, the 22 counties of the Sierra Nevada Conservancy area. And then maybe we do the San Joaquin Valley. Then maybe we do the Central Coast. And you know something? If you had 5% in 3 or 4 of those, that's pretty good risk portfolio diversity, don't you think? But you're all investing in California. That would be money that doesn't even go through Wall Street. Stays here to be invested in our community infrastructure and our Main Street businesses and our value-added ag and biofuels so that our economy can start racing. That's what we're about. And the folks in this room, you're the ones going to make it happen. Utilizing our intangible capital, our connections with each other, the talking you're doing today, the lobbying, the advocacy, the research, all that skill that's in this room helping move this forward. So that's the partnership I'm looking forward to working with you all on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Glenda. And wonderful. And Glenda's going to be here with us through the cocktail hour, so you can have more discussion with her. And that's a great benefit for all of us. At this point, we're going to move into the panel of the regional leaders. We are very grateful to Trish Kelly for being a partner with the California Emerging Technology Fund from the very beginning. And as she introduced herself, you heard how many of the regional consortia she's actually helped. And of course, her professional service goes way beyond what we do at CETF with economic development, with regional collaboration, being one of the principals of the California Center for Regional Leadership when it was founded. And she also has her own, or is a principal in a consulting business. But she does a whole lot more with many of you, and is the perfect person to facilitate the lessons learned from the regional consortia that have been operating for some time, and to then draw out the questions and issues that the newly formed regional consortia have. So here's someone who gives of herself a lot to so many different organizations and is one of the best economic development experts in California. Ladies and gentlemen, Trish Kelly.
Sunny is too generous. I always tell her that she's my leader. I follow in her footsteps, and we learn and lead with each other, and we work together, and it's been fabulous working with everybody, and it's exciting to see us being in the transition now. And we're moving from a lot of the support that CETF and Sunny and all the staff and the board have given us tremendous support over the last several years. Now we're moving to the next phase of being a more organized learning network and working with the PUC with the funding. So we're very grateful to all of our partners. I also want to thank Linda. I've been working with her in some of our rural projects, and she's phenomenal. So I hope you have a chance to work with her, and I know she's totally committed to our communities. We originally had more time scheduled, so we're going to accelerate as we're accelerating our work plans and to get to action. But what we want to do is hear from the first group of consortia that were the original regional consortia grantees from CETF, and they are located in the northern and central Sierra parts of the state. And they really focus very deeply, and you've heard some of the work today, on demand aggregation and strategies to really understand what the condition of our rural areas were. The second set of panelists is going to be responding to the comments that they hear, and they are the ones that came, the genesis for a lot of that work came out of the regional forum that CETF sponsored, and they are more blended regions. They're not just rural, they're urban and suburban, so they really have a lot of diversity. There's tremendous diversity across our regions anyway, but within each of our consortia there's a lot of diversity. So what we want to do is we're just going to go down on the order of the people that are listed here, and in the interest of time and getting to the other speakers, because I know we want to hear too about the new program from the PUC staff and getting to the cocktail hour. We're going to not address the questions individually, but we're going to ask our commentators to just give us their general insights on this. We've heard some information earlier this afternoon from the regional consortia, and we will have more discussion opportunities tomorrow. So what I'd like to do is start with Connie Stewart from the Redwood Coast Connect. And as her introduction, she's going to give us a little overview on some of the challenges that our rural areas face around environmental review process. Ready? You want to just say something and then I'll...
Oh, I'm being told say something while we set up the video here. I could talk to you about things you already know, but basically we have broadband forums every year, and I think it's more powerful to hear from the folks. I'm going to focus on some of the environmental and regulatory challenges with actually installing. And thanks to Susan Estrada for coming to all of our broadband forums and taking this 3-minute clip. So, ready? Are you ready? Uh-oh.
We had audio.
Okay, I'll talk until Jim comes up. Oh my gosh, we're gonna have to go back too because Jim kind of says it all, huh? Oh, technical difficulties.
Any questions?
Oh no, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. Okay, here comes the sound here. So, ready?
The rural broadband dilemma, right-of-way and environmental permitting.
A message that I could leave you with is try to find ways of lowering the barriers to getting this infrastructure in.
Our regulator, we have the authority to issue encroachment permits for work that's being done within the state right-of-way. But for a broadband permit process, we shoot to complete that within 40 days.
With broadband facilities that span long distances, you'll often have projects that would go from one jurisdiction to the next.
And we have 22 parks, approximately 135,000 acres. Even for our own projects, we're subject to both CEQA and the Coastal Act for permitting. In addition to that, and the State Endangered Species Act, there's the Federal Endangered Species Act, there's the Port of Cologne, there's the Clean Water Act, Federal Migratory Bird Act, several other state and or federal environmental protection type policies.
We can't build out sites as easily due to government restrictions. We don't partner well with, say, Caltrans or the local government road departments. We've actually gone in and tried to build fiber optics into a community and gotten stopped by the local, whether it's road department or Caltrans. And then the very next year, we come in there and we've driven down that road, and they've done a road widening and a road improvement when they wanted to charge or have us pay for a couple $100,000 environmental study that they were already doing.
Because if you're going through, you want to put a fiber optic through a stand that could be marbled murrelet habitat, well, you would need to do 2 years of surveys.
And underneath CEQA, you have to evaluate significant adverse effect to the environment includes impacts to native vegetation, to wildlife, to fisheries, to soils, to water quality, to recreational values, to cultural resources, to view sheds. And all of those things have to be considered.
There could be listed plants out there, and they flowered back in March. You know, you need a year to get out there and do the surveys for those critters.
But a lot of time our equipment's too big to put in that right-of-way, or the right-of-way's too small. So we have to try to get a private right-of-way. And as we've had landowners come to us, and we wanted a 20 by 20 lot, and they wanted as much for that 20 by 20 little parcel as the whole 5-acre parcel. And basically, we just don't do the job when we have those things in the way.
What's needed is we just need to have a discussion about the difference between large-scale commercial installations and small-time providers that are providing a critical service to rural areas that will not get service any other way.
Join us in getting from here to big broadband everywhere.
So then the only other thing I would add for my challenges, because everybody else can handle it, is matching funds for some of these middle mile bills. That's going to be a huge challenge. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Connie. Oops, excuse me. And I will note from the discussion of the coverage on the households that what we have found in a lot of our regions is that business parks and economic development areas are not covered. So that's another underserved area that's not reflected in so much in the mapping. So now we're going to continue with the discussion with the Rural Consortia. Shelley, could each person please introduce yourself in your area?
Shelley Hance, Central Sierra Connect. And I, if I understand this correctly, of course Connie sets the bar straight. I was thinking this was more of a conversation, but what I want to talk about is collaboration and building your consortiums, because that's where I think we were really strong. In a rural area, we do everything together. And I think that it is just so important. Sunny talked about buckshot as a farm girl. You want to use buckshot that works for your area. You know, I think I've heard it around the table over and over. You're not going to find 5 people who meet everything you need. You're going to need your whole community. Be as diverse, be as odd out there of any groups you wouldn't think would come to the table. And then the next thing is we're all broadband. Everyone here raised their hands. They use high speed. If they've got it, they use smartphones. And not all and we're talking about very busy people. One of the lessons learned for us is our public officials, we expected that they had the time. We send emails out, we send newsletters. They don't have the time for that. And they wanted to be involved. And we found them saying, we need more information. We want you to update us. We're saying, we're updating you all the time. We did special phone conferences for them every other week during this project. Special for 4 boards of supervisors. They were on there, their CAOs were on there, their IT folks were on there, and then we did conference calls for everybody else in the consortium. So don't just think, oh, we're talking internet here, we don't need to do anything else. Use your diversity, use your face-to-face. Nothing is as good as having face-to-face. It's relationship building, it's trust building. The same with your small ISPs. You've got a lot of folks, they compete, getting them all together, building trust, that is what it's all about. And use your local strengths. What we did is not going to work for you, it's not going to work for San Bernardino, didn't work for Humboldt. Things are all different, and we all have our local strengths. So when you get everybody at the table, keep looking at who's not at the table every single time, and then keep saying, who do we need, what do we need, and communicate as diversely as you can with them. And then we did some really creative things. We looked at what we could do with our partners. When we did our surveying, we did not go out and say, and hire a company. One of our partners, Behavioral Health, Disabilities Group, they did our surveying. We used our partners in every way we could with people that were around the table. And then the other diverse thing, the other really unique thing we did was around mapping, and just really briefly, I want to give it to Erin because mapping came up so much here, and it was very, very creative what she did for us.
Well, I can't take credit for me doing it. It was a collaborative effort. We brainstormed and we were struggling with accuracy versus precision. And I've taught at the university level, and I've given an hour-long presentation on that, so I'll spare you that. But what we worked on was trying to figure out the maps that we received from the CBTF, the task force, and this was back in 2008. We did the mapping in 2009, and to validate what we were seeing on the map versus what actually occurred. And everybody really trusts their map. They trust it on the GPS navigation. They'll follow it, and they'll go down a ditch because the woman on the map said to do that. And again, as a mapper, I produce a lot of maps that are lies. All maps are lies. All maps are lies. 1 inch does not equal 1 mile, okay, people? So what we did was we did something called crowdsourcing, and we went and we wanted to ground truth the information and check it against what the state was providing. So we developed a very simple Google Maps interface where people would type in their address and do a speed test. And I have the FCC speed test now on my phone. Wherever I go, I do the speed test. But that is then geotagged and then mapped live, so all the live results pop up. We had about 300 responses, which is pretty good. And then we were able to look at that and cross-check it versus the state map. So as Shelley heard, and we're hearing mapping as an issue, this may be a tool that we can represent and talk to regents about and maybe assist with this type of thing. So that wasn't as brief as it should have been, but anyway, back to Shelley.
I've been sitting here wondering what I was going to say. You know, it was just over 4 years ago last month, in fact, that I was recruited for the second time. I spent 21 years of my life as an Army officer, and at a conference at UCLA in October of 2007, I sat next to Sonny. And that day I became a member of Sonny's Army. And I've been immersed in broadband ever since. And it's been fun. Thank you, Sonny. I appreciate that. In preparation for this, I thought it was supposed to be about best practices, and I'll just consolidate all that into that simple thing. And I'll say I think 3 things have worked for us. First, we have the business. When I met Sonny, she didn't know me from Adam. She didn't know anything about my organization. She didn't know that CETF was a regional economic development organization, that we represented 4 counties. We have supervisors, county supervisors. We have city council members. We have members of local business on our board of directors that meets every month. I was really gratified to hear as we went around the room today how many of the consortia mentioned some kind of economic development organization with which they're associated. When 7 of us started this journey with Sonny 4 years ago, or shortly thereafter it became 7 of us, ours, CETF, was the only one. And I'll come back to that as a matter of importance. But the fact that we had all this representation already among 4 of the 4.5 counties that was a part of our project in the aggregation of demand before meant that we could tap into that at any time. This whole topic of broadband has been a continuous item of interest for 4 years across our 4 counties. I know for some of you, you've had to work really hard, continually going out to remind your communities and people in your communities and important organizations about broadband. Remember, it's still important. I've never had to struggle with that because I've got this organization that was always interested in whatever the latest update was. They've been wholeheartedly supporting, so when it came down to the opportunity for the consortia, I could turn to them and say, so we need letters of support. We need to begin to identify the organizations that are going to participate as interested parties in this, and it happened very quickly as a consequence of it. Others of you who benefit from that same kind of organization know what I mean. That's the best way to go. Second is, As an economic development organization, we from the outset took a business approach to this thing. It wasn't a social approach, and that's probably a weakness as well as a strength, and I acknowledge that. But the point is, we were focused from the outset on outcomes. The day I interviewed with the board of directors, or the chairman of my board of directors right after being hired, his first words to me were, it's time to start getting some things done. And that's been characteristic of our projects ever since then. That's what all of this is about. That's what you all know. And so we built it as a business from the outset. So we looked at what outcomes did we desire, what was the plan to get there, what's the return on investment for the approaches that we would take, a very business-like attitude. We take that now in our consortium approach. It's organize demand, facilitate the supply. That creates good ideas. Money follows good ideas. That's our plan. Just that simple. That plan's been working for us, and that's the third point. We're a financial organization as well as providing business services, business training, things like that. As much as I like to hear about the success of organizations, I can't help but tout a little bit of success of our own. Since April of 2008, by making small business loans as an intermediary for Glinda, the USDA's loan program, we've made 5 loans to internet service providers that have now resulted in connections to over 2,000 households. Right now, well, not right now, but yesterday, Monday, I intend to present to our loan committee our 6th loan. That one will be in El Dorado County, Norma. And it's going to be a new one for us that in effect creates a line of credit kind of approach that will result in connecting 5,000 more households in 2 years. Total investment between all of those is about $700,000, average investment per household, about $350. 100% of that is debt financing. It'll all be repaid as revolving loan funds to be put out there again. There's not a single grant dollar in there. It can be done from a business approach. That's the strength that we've found. That's one of the keys to our success.
I'm Kathy Emerson, and I represent 12 of California's northern counties, 7 for the Northeastern California Connect, and 5 for what was the Upstate California Connect for the broadband demand aggregation. And I came into this project blind. I wish I'd had the same level of success that you all have quoted, but my story's a little different, and I'll spare you the gory details because as an outsider coming in, nobody knew who I was. There are some advantages to being a non-entity, but there's some extraordinary disadvantages when rural communities very much rely on a handshake and eye-to-eye contact for verification and validity of who the actual individual is. The broadband demand aggregation studies netted us statistical information that told us information that varied dramatically from what the rest of the state's information said and what the Pew Charitable Trusts studies said nationwide. The biggest difference is that while on a nationwide basis, on a nationwide average, about 8 to 10% of the population didn't use the internet. Don't know why, but they just didn't use it. Well, in the northern counties, specifically the 7 northeastern, that number was double. 18 to 22% of the northern county residents did not use the internet. Why? Well, the demand aggregation studies told us it was because A, they didn't own a computer, and B, they didn't use the internet. I couldn't tell you then why that was. Now I can. And I'm sorry that Rochelle's not here, but I take issue with something that she said earlier. The biggest problem in the rural communities is adoption, not access. I beg to differ. I know differently. I have I've spoken to too many people and I've seen too many issues. And a mile and a half south of Chico, which is one of the 2 urban pockets north of Sacramento, the other one being Redding, a mile and a half south in the rice fields, I get no cell signal. Nothing. It's a dead zone basically until I get to I-5. There are all sorts of other details that play into that. Well, move the calendar forward 2.5 years. 2 years. In September of 2010, when SB 1040 was passed, I thought, Okay, here's a hook. Because what I'd been hearing from the northern communities was that stop telling us about studies, stop telling us what the demographics say. We need infrastructure. We need actual physical equipment to connect the dots. SB 1040 was passed. I started making phone calls, and this is after 2 years of having the door shut in my face. And I started getting yeses. I'm in. Yes, I'm in. Yes, I'm in. If you can make this happen, I'm in. So when the guidelines came out for the eligibility criteria and the applications, Tom West and I were on the phone one night, and I said, well, if you're going after this, so am I. We need to partner. I sent out mass emails, and within 6 weeks, I had 76 organizations, entities, nonprofits, county governments who lined up and said, yes, we're in, we want to make this happen. The vehicle and the mechanism to bring this to light is not just the adoption, but it's the middle mile. You got to have the backbone in order to have the backhaul. To those 3 questions, what are the keys to a successful regional consortium? I build on what Shelley said. It's collaboration. For effective collaboration, you've got to have buy-in. How do you get buy-in? You get people at the table. The second thing, what are the major lessons learned? Data is as data does. The third, what are your priority strategies? Well, first of all, the big vision. Where are we going? What road are we using to get there? We need to have something to throw targets at. In this case, it's a middle mile infrastructure, fiber base that spans 16 counties. The second piece is the plan. The plan, I spoke, okay. The third piece are the individual endpoints. To build redundancy, what are the regional locations going to do? What are the actual counties going to do? It's one thing for us to get all the internet service providers to participate and say, buy in, play with us, but how does that help the folks at the end of the line? Because they're the ones who are the beneficiaries, the end users, the adopters, the folks who actually pay the monthly subscription, which equates to sustainability. Right? Okay.
Okay, yeah, my name's Doug Thompson. I come from a really small rural area. I grew up on a homestead. Came from Kansas, Colorado. Came to California in 1962. I came to Oakland, Alameda, California, right across the bay here, United States Coast Guard. It's been a great life. Somehow I ended up moving to Inyo County about 30 years ago, I guess. And over the years, we are president of the Economic Development Corporation, Lone Pine Economic Development Corporation. And we have one of the farm loans, a 515 farm loan. And it's a great project. It had drugs, prostitution, everything goes with those programs. And we decided to take it over. We said we're going to make this into a successful project. So we borrowed $350,000 from the USDA, and they said, you think you can make it work? I said, yeah, well, we can do that. It'll be slow, but we can make it do it. And throughout that process, we got a really strong relationship with the USDA, and I really want to thank Glenda Hummingsmith for coming to the counties, all the counties. She did an incredible job doing the jobs forms, and not only doing the jobs form, but then coming back and making a detailed report to each one of the counties. It was a really astronomical effort. I don't know how she did it. So in the process of all these things that we do in these rural areas, you have to develop relationships. And these relationships take 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Nothing happens overnight. Nothing ever happens fast. So the apartment project was one of the things that we worked on. I worked on with the U.S. Forest Service on the travel management. That was an easy process. We facilitated the meetings for the travel management on Inyo National Forest with their Desert Mountain RC&D. Well, this is a group that you have. One side of the table is the off-road people. The other side of the group is the other side of the table is a group might be the Sierra Club. They historically don't get along. I have never seen why they don't get along, but it just doesn't seem like they get along. So we had a training program from a back east company called Lincoln Institute, and they sort of taught us how to listen. And that was one of the biggest parts that we had in this process. We were asked by the 3 counties, Inyo County, Mono County, and Kern County, portions of Kern County, to take on this project. We do watershed coordinators, we do livestock feasibility studies, we do Mount Whitney apartment projects that we take and we have. We didn't ever know anything about broadband. But we have the facilities to bring people together to do the things one at a time, and that's what we did. So I think the success for our model has been the support we've had from the Board of Supervisors, the people, all these. When we started asking for letters of support, I was amazed how many letters of support we had just off of one email. We didn't shake the tree. We didn't go out and shake hands. We just sent a mass email the last couple of weeks for letters of support, and the letters of support came in. And I think that's the foundation for the rural areas, that you have to be on the street, you have to have eye contact, you have to do that handshaking, you have to have the credibility, and you have to be able to, when you go to the grocery store and they tell you what you did wrong, you have to be able to be accountable for that. Those are some of the success stories I have. And then the next steps, part of our process, we're in this digital 395 everybody keeps talking about. We're not part of that, but that's going to be a big event in our life. Digital 395 didn't come to Lone Pine, California to help the 12 people there. It's going to be a giant program that if we have the ability to take advantage of that, it's going to be giant for our area. And that's the struggle we always have in the rural areas. Things can happen. You can put a 4-lane highway through town, but if you don't have a truck stop on either end, you have no benefit. So the planning that we need to do in the next 3 to 5 years is make that an asset. Everybody talks about the middle mile. Well, we have a $100 million middle mile going through our area. So it's up to us now to take advantage of that. And that's going to be critical. What do we do from here the next couple, 3 to 5 years to make that a success? That's where we on the street have to then go out and talk to the neighborhoods, and it's not only getting the middle mile into the town, but we have areas that are 30, 40 miles outside of 395. Well, those are the areas we have to focus on. We have one guy, it's a small town, it's got like 22 people. He's about 40 miles from Lone Pine. And him and I have been working together. We have a hotel in the middle of Lone Pine. So we don't know a lot about these FCC and all these rules, but we put up a tower on the top of our building. And we're going to broadcast out in the middle of the desert. And if in the middle of the desert, we're going to go 15 to 20 miles, and he's going to broadcast into the town of Darwin. And I think we brought him on the consortium board because that's a model. We're not going to wait. We call it the white horse syndrome. We're not going to wait for the big white horse to come down and do anything for us. We have to do these things ourselves, and that's what we're going to do. And the guy back here talked to earlier this afternoon about a new process with the TV wave. I think that might be something we do. Honestly, I think we had a lot of support when we wrote the grant for the consortium application from Inland Empire. I remember getting pressure to sign a letter. I finally got around to it. I'm a cook too. I cook hamburgers. And then San Joaquin Valley. I want to make sure that I thank them too. That's all I have. Thank you.